Hi, I'm Jim with Sabrosa Firearms Training. Conceptually, shooting a pistol is the easiest thing in the world. It's a simple matter of aligning your sights on the target and then making sure that those sights stay aligned on target when you pull the trigger. What I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce a bunch of different variables, and we're going to test for ourselves which variables are most important to making a good shot. I've set a target with a 6-inch circle in it up at 10 yards. I'm going to use 5 shots on each target, and that should give me a pretty good idea of how I'm doing and how it reflects on the other parts. We did a bunch of shooting. We talked about the fundamentals. So going from bottom to top, you've got your stance, you've got your grip, you've got your aiming, which is sight picture and sight alignment, you got your trigger press, and you have your follow through. And then in there, you also have breath control and hold control and all that other stuff. But when we talk about those fundamentals, we already established that a given is sight picture and sight alignment. If you don't have proper sight picture and you don't have proper sight alignment, there's no way you're going to hit the target. Now, the rest of those, we want to figure out, do we need to have all of them, or are some more important than others? And actually, the results of this test were really interesting. So what I did with this one is I shot looking only at the front sight, not trying to see where my hits landed, just looking straight at the front sight. And if you use follow through correctly, you're actually able to call your shots without ever looking at the target. So this one here was my correct fundamentals without paying a whole lot of attention to follow through. This was correct fundamentals, paying attention to follow through. And you see the group is much tighter than the other one. So I'm going to kind of use this one as my baseline. And so I traded some other things and did some different variables. And it seems like the most important fundamental after sight picture and sight alignment is trigger press. Which, let's see what happens when I slap the trigger. Not so good. Trigger. Now, if you look at this, I only actually got 2 in the 6-inch circle. I got 1 on the paper, and then I had 2 outside the target range completely. And so trigger discipline plays a huge role in your accuracy. Remember at the beginning of the video, I said, shooting a gun is the easiest thing in the world. All you have to do is align your sights on the target, and then make sure that the pistol doesn't move when you pull the trigger. Well, a good sound trigger press will help enable to do that. But you see a lot of stuff in YouTube where people talk a lot about grip. And now, just the weakest grip I can dare to try. I felt like I was a 70s cop shooting in that one. I did a very bizarre grip where I held it way below the beaver tail. They always talk about this notch of your hand being up into the beaver tail, which is a proper grip, but instead I shot with it way down here and a very weak grip as well. So not only was I getting um, a lame kind of grip, but I was getting a lot of muzzle flip as well. And so the results of that were pretty interesting. So just the weak grip alone, I did okay. Um, it wasn't so bad. The low weak grip, the really sad, way low weak grip, those results were acceptable as well, or at least I would say that they were acceptable. We had all 5 in, and it's a pretty decent grouping, probably within 4 inches. And then final variation is we looked at stance. And people talk about stance, and stance is very important because that's kind of the platform. And so the one thing that I learned with stance is I did 2 different types. I did a pogo stick stance where my feet were together way underneath me. I'm a big kind of fattish guy, and so my profile was kind of like an ice cream cone, kind of narrow at the bottom and wider on top. And so that pogo stick stance, what was weird about it is it was very unbalanced, but the results from the pogo stick stance were not too bad, except for this last shot, which went really low. And I actually remember that shot, and that's when I was off balance and was starting to lean forward a little bit, and I tried to get the shot off before I kind of collapsed forward. But other than that, stance didn't make that big of a difference. But tell me, who can resist the action lunge? Got him. Target. Now, that's a strained, unnatural, uncomfortable stance, and it's very hard to hold for a while. And so the results of this weren't surprising. Everything was low. They were fairly consistent, but they were consistently low. So what does all this stuff tell us? It tells us, again, that when you're talking about, when you're talking about being a good shooter or shooting accurately, again, it's the easiest thing in the world to do. All you have to do is align your sights on target and then make sure that your sights don't move when you pull the trigger. And so if you think about that naturally, what that's going to mean is sight alignment and sight picture is your number one priority. You have to get a good sight alignment or sight picture unless you're point shooting, which is a different matter. Anything within 5 yards or 7 yards, maybe, if you're lucky, you can pretty much point the pistol and hit where you're aiming. Out at 10 yards, you definitely have to have a sight alignment and a good sight picture. But your trigger press is going to be your next biggest factor. The rest of those fundamentals, they're all necessary, but they're more like nice to haves instead of have to haves. And what I see mostly from novice shooters in my classes are the people who can't hit the target. They're slapping, they've got a real trigger problem. And then more fundamentally, they do not understand how to align those sights on the target. So that's today's lesson. Hopefully it was interesting. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out on the range. Keep practicing. And if you have a pistol that you use or carry around, be sure to shoot it more than once a year and you'll be better off.